and welcome. My name is Paige, and I'm part of the Community Relations team at Deschutes Public Library. This program is part of Deschutes Public Library's virtual programming. Check out all of our great virtual programming at deschuteslibrary.org. Tonight's presenters are Colleen Thomas. She is the Homeless Services Coordinator for Deschutes County, as well as Chairwoman of the Homeless Leadership Coalition, Central Oregon's Continuum of Care. Stacy Whitty is the founder, president, and visionary of REACH, Relationship Empowerment, Action, Compassion, Heart. Tally Wennick is the clinical supervisor for Best Care Treatment Services at their Deschutes outpatient locations. And Adam Goggins is the clinical supervisor at the Deschutes County Stabilization Center in Deschutes County, Oregon. I will now turn it over to Colleen to get us started. Colleen, take it away.
Thank you, Paige, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. Before I get started, I also just want to thank all of you for attending this forum tonight. I think this is a really important topic that none of us are immune to. So it's really important to be able to have these conversations. And I just want to thank Deschutes Public Library for hosting us tonight. So I'm going to start off. Thank you, Paige. Again, my name is Colleen Thomas. I'm the Homeless Services Coordinator for Deschutes County Health Services. And I also work as the chairwoman for the Homeless Leadership Coalition, which is our continuum of care, serving Crook, Deschutes, Jefferson counties, and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about homelessness and what does that look like in Deschutes County and across our region. So why don't you go ahead, Adam? Thank you. So homelessness is a really interesting and dynamic topic. Homelessness is not the one-size-fits-all crisis in our area or nationwide. Homelessness really is a spectrum of different circumstances that each individual is facing, just depending on if it's family circumstances, mental health, addiction, or just situational crises. What we like to talk about when we talk about homelessness is it really is a spectrum. It's not only those individuals that you are seeing in our community that might be, panhandling outside, or, someone that's, as you can see on the screen, is huddled just trying to stay warm. Especially in Central Oregon, we see a spectrum of how homelessness impacts our community. Many of the individuals in our community are faced with this crisis. They're the baristas that you are serving your daily coffee just downtown Bend. They're the individuals that are your ski lift operators and those that you are just passing by or in the grocery store. You might not necessarily know what homelessness looks like, and I think it's really important as we have this conversation to understand that homelessness is really individualized, and our approach to addressing homelessness really needs to be individualized. All right, Adam. So there is, again, as I said, there's no one story, no one size fits all when we talk about homelessness. It's a really fluid experience, and it's an individualized circumstance. When I first got into this work several years ago, there was often a quote that was used that stated, "We are all one paycheck away from experiencing homelessness," or one crisis away from experiencing homelessness. Each individual and what they're dealing with is their circumstance. And so, as you can see here, United Way of Halifax came up with this great infographic, about what homelessness looks like and how we can approach homelessness. You might often hear in our community different ways to address homelessness, and that's kind of maybe why you're here today. And so when we talk about this, there's many different aspects to the response system and continuum of services when we are working with individuals in our community. That's all the way from managed camps, which you might hear a lot in our community as a topic of potential solutions to addressing homelessness, all the way up to, affordable housing and multifamily units and everything in between. And so as my role as someone that is addressing homelessness is we really need everything in between when we talk about solutions. So we need emergency shelter, and within emergency shelter, we need different options of emergency shelter, including low barrier to high barrier. We also need permanent supportive housing, which is an option for individuals that may be experiencing chronic homelessness that really need to have that supportive services to be successful in housing. We need workforce housing. That's a big topic as well. We have, as I mentioned in the slide before, a lot of our community and the folks that are in our workforce are experiencing homelessness because of the increasing rates in the cost of living and housing in our community. So again, we need to really work on the continuum of services and identify the gaps and work to be able to provide as much services and resources to all individuals and really approach it as an individualized experience. All right, so some of you might not be aware of the numbers or might be really interested in what are the numbers of individuals experiencing homelessness in our area. Some of you might be familiar with the point in time count or heard that as a buzzword. The point in time count is an annual count or survey of individuals experiencing homelessness in our region that takes place every year. It's a HUD mandated, so Housing Urban Development mandates continuum of care to complete this survey every year to kind of get a better sense of who is experiencing homelessness in our region and what are the reasons for them experiencing homelessness. One of the really important things about that survey is it impacts the amount of service funding that we receive in our community to address this crisis. So this last year, the point in time count, as you can see on the screen, these are key takeaways of the numbers of individuals that voluntarily participated in the survey. That's a key piece, is that the survey for the point in time count is voluntary. So this is only a snapshot of the larger population across our region of people that are experiencing homelessness. And we know that the whole population is a lot larger than these numbers. But still, with that, looking at these numbers, we have a huge increase in individuals experiencing homelessness. So this last year, for the 2021 survey that took place in January, we surveyed 169 unaccompanied youth, 89 veterans, 891 adults, 18 and older, which totaled 1,098 individuals in our community experiencing homelessness. That was a 13% increase from the year before. And if you really think about that, when we had the limitations of what COVID-19 had and the impact that COVID-19 had on our ability to survey folks, we still saw a 13% increase. So no matter what we say or what we see or, our individual experiences, I think what we can extrapolate is that those numbers are increasing, especially with our unaccompanied youth numbers, and it's really concerning. So how do we as a community look at those numbers and begin to address specific resources and areas to be able to make sure that that number is going down? It's really difficult, but that is kind of a snapshot of those individuals experiencing homelessness in our region. So here's another just kind of change. As you can see, as I said, that we had that 13% overall increase from 20 to 2021 for total individuals. But these numbers are preliminary. We are working, as you can imagine, the data in a voluntary survey is very difficult with a volunteer organization running that survey. But this is just really important for, I think, our community to see that numbers do fluctuate depending on how the survey is administered and year to year. But again, we're continuing to see that jump in individuals experiencing homelessness. So this is just another opportunity to share a little bit of other information. We often hear in our community that individuals that are experiencing homelessness in our region aren't from Central Oregon. But in fact, when we surveyed in 2020, 84% of those individuals that were surveyed last were stably housed in Oregon. This is kind of to address that notion of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. We often hear that as service providers and in our community of, if you build it, they will come, which in fact, if we look at the data, is not actually true. A lot of individuals in our community, whether their rent increased or job changes or, again, just a family crisis, will really impact how individuals experience homelessness in our region. So it's important, again, to acknowledge as we look at resources and services for these individuals that we're really looking at supporting those individuals that are our community members. They are part of our community and they belong in our community. All right, so as I kind of mentioned, when we talk about homelessness and homeless response and homeless services and resources, we really are looking at the continuum of care, the continuum of services for our region. As I mentioned, when we are working with individuals, that it needs to be individualized and each person might need a different type of service. And when we look at funding opportunities and we look at where are the gaps in our system, we're looking at where can we really make an impact and what are the areas that we need to support individuals. So as you can see on this screen, this is a continuum of different services that are offered in our region for all individuals. We talk about prevention services. That's to really keep individuals housed where they are. That's a big piece of wanting to keep people stably housed and in their community. And so as you can see, there's a list of agencies that provide that prevention services. Dignity services is a huge one. Dignity services includes access to shower, laundry, food, basic needs along those lines. We have a lot of wonderful mutual aid groups in our community, as well as agencies that have been in our community for years. And those are really important services when we're talking about supporting individuals that may not fall into the community description of what homelessness is or what is needed. Street outreach. So that's really important. That's really meeting folks where they're at, providing that exact outreach to folks and making sure that they have access to those dignity services or are aware of what other resources there are in our community. Shelter. Shelter is huge, but it's not the end all be all for all individuals. And when we talk about shelter, and I'll talk about this in a minute, is we need to talk about different types of shelter, from low barrier or no barrier all the way up to high barrier and everything in between. Shelter, again, is not the right exact resource for every individual, but it's definitely a part of our community that helps people get back on their feet. Transitional housing, that's an opportunity for folks to, get back on their feet and be able to really focus on what are their needs and to be able to have that safe place with a roof over their head to do so. Permanent housing. So that is an opportunity of projects where, individuals are provided housing and that is not contingent on funding or program eligibility. That's offering folks housing that's going to meet their needs for as long as they need it. So as I mentioned, when we talk about shelter and we talk about resources in our community, oftentimes we hear, well, we just need shelter, or this agency just expanded. How come there's still individuals that are experiencing homelessness are on the street? It's really interesting. And really, again, there's not a one size fits all. So when we talk about the point in time count, or we talk about offering additional resources for folks experiencing homelessness, we need to talk about the definitions as well, because each agency or each demographic might be categorizing homelessness in a different way. So as you can see, there's a couple different definitions here of sheltered, which means that someone is in a place where they have a roof over their head or being provided a resource that meets their needs for safety. Unsheltered or literally homeless is other words that you might hear. Unsheltered and literally homeless, usually under the HUD definition, means that it's a place where someone is staying not meant for human habitation. That means a car, a bus station, an RV without hookups on BLM land. That's a big popular or common situation that we see in Central Oregon. Low barrier shelter, that's a big one. So low barrier really means that you are offering someone shelter and that has minimal criteria for how they access shelter. That means someone can come in under the influence, they can have their pets with them. It's really an opportunity to decrease barriers so that people have an opportunity to get inside during extreme weather, or just any time during the year, that they have a safe place to go that gets them inside if that is something that they want. It's a real big need in our community. We've been lucky that Shepherd's House Ministries in the city of Bend just expanded to offer year-round low barrier shelter in Bend, which is awesome, but we still need more of that. We still need more low barrier shelter. It's a gap in our continuum. And then we have high barrier shelter. Many folks might are familiar with Bethlehem Inn, and Bethlehem Inn is a high barrier shelter. And that the definition for that is that there's expectations on how someone accesses services, meaning they have to pass certain criteria to be able to access shelter. It's like a breathalyzer, pass or not be a registered sex offender, or come in under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So a little bit, so that's just kind of a very brief overview, right? That is something, homelessness is a very complex issue, and that is just a little bit to touch on what homelessness is in our region. Another piece that we wanted to talk about today is my role at Deschutes County Health Services that ties into mental health and addiction services for those experiencing homelessness in Central Oregon. Deschutes County Health Services, we do have a homeless outreach team that includes myself and my colleague, Katie DeVito. And we are really serving individuals in our community that have a severe and persistent mental illness that are experiencing homelessness. Our role through the county is to meet folks throughout Deschutes County where they're at and ensure that they have access or know how to access services when and if they're wanting to do so. This is not a mandatory thing, but again, our role in the community is to be a resource for those folks, build the rapport, connect them to available resources. Of course, long-term goal of providing housing, but really just to be able to be an additional person in the community that folks feel connected to. So over this past year, Katie and I, we were trying to look at our numbers, but we annually serve at least a unique 250 individuals experiencing homelessness throughout Deschutes County. Again, that is not all individuals experiencing homelessness, but those are the ones that we're touching on a monthly, weekly basis. And again, that is all throughout Deschutes County. Deschutes County, and I know Adam will touch on this a little bit later, but we have great resources that we are able to connect folks to throughout the county, whether that's mental health, treatment, our stabilization center, crisis services, and much more. So again, the big picture, as I've talked about here, is that, it's not a one size fits all, but our role is to really connect with those folks in the community and do our best to be able to ensure that those individuals in the community feel connected. Okay. There was a request just to kind of talk about the recent heat emergency that we had and kind of what our response to that was. As many of you are aware, we did hit extreme temperature throughout Deschutes County and Central Oregon, really that impacted a lot of our individuals in the community, not only those experiencing homelessness, but other vulnerable populations as well. We were lucky enough with partnerships through City of Bend and Deschutes County and mutual aid groups and First Presbyterian pandemic partners and so many volunteers in our community that we were able to really provide access to those dignity services, as I mentioned, and basic needs, including water and hats, sunscreen, and again, just making sure, checking on folks to make sure that they felt safe and had access to those resources in the community. We, throughout that week of that heat emergency, myself and Katie, we delivered 645 gallons of water throughout the community to those that needed it. And so that's part of the work we do, is boots on the ground, really connecting with folks and making sure that we are keeping folks in our community safe. All right, so I talked a lot about just, what Deschutes County Health Services is able to provide for folks experiencing homelessness, the Continuum of Care, the Homeless Leadership Coalition. But I also wanted to just touch on a couple other projects and initiatives that are available for folks if they are interested in learning more. The Homeless Leadership Coalition, as I mentioned, we are the Continuum of Care, serving Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson counties, including the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. Right now, we're meeting virtually on the first Friday of every month. If you have interest in connecting to learn more about some initiatives and projects that are happening across our region, check us out, cohomeless.org. It's a great opportunity to network and learn more. Housing for All is another group that's working on some housing initiatives. That is through the Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council. They are actually helping, and we're partnering with them right now to update the 10-year plan to end homelessness. We met that 10 years this past year, and so we're doing an update to really reflect on what's happened over the last 10 years regarding homelessness in our region. There's the Regional Health Council that's also part of COIC. Then we have the Regional Health Improvement Plan work groups that is through the Central Oregon Health Council. There's two specific groups there that are addressing housing and homelessness, the Poverty and Self-Sufficiency Work Group and the Housing Regional Health Improvement Work Group. So those are great opportunities, and they're open to the public to join as well. There's also been great efforts with Deschutes County and City of Bend for the Emergency Homeless Task Force that's really trying to address what is the roadmap for addressing homelessness in our community. City of Bend is also working on a sounding board for shelter solutions. I know Stacy sits on that group and she'll be talking here in a minute. There's the Bend Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, Interagency Public Lands Work Group that is a lot of public lands management leaders talking about how do we address homelessness in our community for folks that are camping illegally on public lands, and how do we best support those individuals being impacted by relocations or cleanups. We've also been really working on a permanent supportive housing learning collaborative, which is a national effort really to focus on how do we bring permanent supportive housing to our community to address that chronic homelessness crisis in our community. And then there's the Built for Zero Learning Collaborative. Again, these are all a few areas that if you have interest in learning more about some of those initiatives, take a look at some of these initiatives, or feel free to reach out to myself. Happy to talk more about what's happening in our community. There's a lot of energy and a lot of focus on addressing homelessness. And so it's really important to think outside the box and really broaden our minds on how do we address this issue. Again, it's not a one size fits all. And so it takes all of us as a community to treat people with dignity and respect, because we are all human and we deserve that. And so looking at initiatives and just ways to get involved, those are some opportunities. And I think that's my last slide. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you being here, and please feel free to reach out in the future.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having me this evening. It's really an honor to come and share more information about REACH and our unhoused community members. REACH is a fairly new nonprofit. I have been doing work with our houseless communities in Washington State and Oregon for the last 16 years. And the complexity of the problem is not getting any easier. What is getting better is the collaboration and communication. And I think we are talking about a really difficult topic. And I think that's where we, forums like this, invite people to ask the questions that may not be politically correct, that everybody thinks about as we drive around our community. Often people are wondering, why don't people get jobs? Why don't they move into housing? Why are they not cleaning up their trash? And I think that it's important that we address those issues in a respectful manner. So I'm hoping that throughout the talk this evening, we'll be able to talk about some of those difficult questions as well. REACH was actually built on relationship. It was a group, an interfaith coalition that came together and wanted to sponsor or back a program. And I had this idea that we have so many amazing collaborative groups in our community, but we still had folks out there that either had not accessed services or the capacity for other groups. So our idea was not to come in and insinuate that people had not been connected with, but we wanted to add one more option and one more support system, both for our houseless organizations, for our faith-based groups, businesses, and other social service providers. COVID has done an interesting push for all of us social service providers by really encouraging more collaboration and more communication, and being really diligent about that, since we're not face to face. So it is a fascinating time, I think, within our nation, around our unhoused community members. So if I can go to the next screen, Adam, we'll talk a little bit more about REACH. So I want to talk about REACH, but as I'm talking about this, I just want to make sure that we're always remembering that this is a collaborative effort with many social service agencies and other volunteer groups that are doing amazing work in our community. One of the questions that comes up frequently is, why are people not coming in to access services? And it's a great question. Transportation can very often be difficult. One of the beautiful things about our region is it is an expansive area. It also can be very challenging for those that are unhoused, because getting from where they're camping back to town can also be quite a trek. And so that can be a huge barrier for people to access medical, to get essential needs, to get help with paperwork, to do things like get a driver's license or an ID or a birth certificate. And so REACH, and along with other agencies, are providing not just a drop-off service where we're just driving by and dropping off food and essential needs. We want to build a relationship with folks. We want to talk about what's working well in your life, what isn't working well, and what can we help you, what tools can we help to give you to become more self-sufficient and independent? And those are the questions that I think really are the foundation of us working with our unhoused community partners and community members. It's so important. Colleen mentioned so many times that it's not a one size fits all. And that's exactly right. We want to co-create these plans with our unhoused community members. The goal is not to go out and tell people what you need to do. It is really to empower them to be thinking and making those decisions to achieve that greater independence and self-sufficiency. We also want to focus on setting people up for success. So if we know that someone is working very hard to get set up on medication, or has a disability or health problem, or is really challenged with an addiction, shoving someone in or pushing them into a job may not be the time to do that. We want to build and help them build a strong foundation on which to then go and be successful when they do go out for working and employment. And if you can stop for just a moment and consider what it would be like to try to work when you're sleeping in the dirt of Central Oregon and not having access to showers, the inability to leave your camp because everything you own may be gone when you come back. So there are a lot of complexities and challenges. It doesn't mean that we can't work on removing some of those barriers, but it does take time. It takes trust. It takes communication. It also takes the understanding that the path to homelessness, there are many of them. There are many reasons why someone becomes homeless. And there are going to be very unique paths out of homelessness. So we need to hold space to be able to help with that. REACH also does, oh, I'm sorry, I kind of confused you, Adam. REACH also, besides the case management piece, we do have access to things like sleeping bags, essential needs, diapers, things we may not think about, undergarments for our older adults that may need those, stoves and heaters and tents. We also have access to gift cards if people need to get additional food. We forget sometimes that our EBT cards, which is like our food assistance, will not pay for items like toilet paper or toothpaste or diapers or feminine hygiene items. So those are things that we can also help with. We also are looking at problem solving. So for a long time, I was finding that many people were getting these wonderful clothing donations, and they'd wear their clothes for a week or two, and then they were throwing them out. And what we're trying to do is work with our community to say, here's another option, and we can provide you with laundry vouchers and soap so that you can now go do your laundry. So we're not filling the landfills with clothing, and we're kind of getting more independent skills. REACH also decided during COVID, in talking to service providers, that there were a couple gaps in services. And one of those gaps will be our next slide, which is our safe car parking program that we started. In Washington State, and in many states and areas, they have a safe car parking program. The wonderful thing about safe car parking is it's very easy to set up. It is very nominal fees to run it. So back in the beginning of COVID, I would say probably April or May, Patty Gaskins, who's another partner in the community, and I decided to start a safe car parking program. The concept was that we would provide a safe place for people to park their cars in the evening and throughout the day. And it wasn't an open door, come all. It was a contact with us. We did an intake. There were guidelines, and there was actually an MOU that was signed with the particular church at that time. We were allowed up to 6 vehicles that could be parked there, and provided very minimal infrastructure. We had a porta potty and a hand washing station. And I think that the real key to the success was that the community partners like Colleen and Katie and myself and Patty and other agencies would come in to do the case management, so we could start working with people on long-term goals like housing, short-term, how can we help you to get your license so you have a legal license, that your car has tabs and registrations. And so by creating a list, a to-do list, a list of action items, we were able to work with folks to achieve those goals. And at the same time, they had a safe place where they knew they could sleep each night, and that it was not going to be woken up because they were in a residential area. We were honoring the other populations, and it was really quite successful. We were at that safe car parking for 90 days. And then after that, the preschool went back in. We now have moved to a new location and been there since November. And again, the program is working well. It is very different when you're trying to work with housing with someone and you know where they are. And so we could set up a meeting and go there. And the success has been really great. We've had about 12, now it's 14, this is a little old, I'm sorry, 15 people that have gone through our safe car parking. The number of vehicles has increased. There's been about 7 going through our safe car parking. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a huge impact for those small numbers. The average age of the person that is using the safe car parking is 55. Like I said, we do have guidelines and there is a signed agreement. And then we do make sure that law enforcement is aware that we're there. We have not had to access law enforcement. I think that's mainly because of relationship, because of being out there. So we are hoping to grow the program. I actually met with Redmond City today, and we're hoping to grow our safe car parking program. Again, this will not be the answer to homelessness in our region, but I do believe it is one of the solutions. I think it's going to take many different projects and models to really address our unhoused community members. But this is such a respectful, relational way to definitely house some folks. So another program, trash. Trash is one of those kind of elephant in the room conversations. People drive around, they see roads and streets where the trash is mounting up. It is a huge problem. We're addressing it in many different ways. People need access to trash receptacles and bags, and I think the city and county have been doing a great job in supporting our efforts out on the street to get more trash pickups and more bags, and we want to empower people to be responsible for their belongings and their trash, and we do need to remove some of the barriers. A program came out of Bottle Drop. Bottle Drop offered to do a sponsorship for a program. And we came up with the idea that if we could get some of our unhoused community members to engage in a program for 2 hours a week where they could come and help clean up the Central District. We supply all of the equipment for them. We do a training. We come and meet them after their shift. And it has been very successful. It's, again, a very small program. We have 6 people that have been engaged in that program. And what we do for every hour that person works to clean up, we exchange a $15 gift card. That way there is an incentive. But I will say this, I think the real incentive I'm finding from people is not so much the gift card. The real incentive is that I think they're finding that they are just, one, feeling so good about being part of the solution. The second thing that's happened is that 3 of our people have gone on to get jobs. And I think what happened was confidence. All of a sudden, they realized they were able to show up at a certain time. They were doing the job. We were giving a lot of feedback. And so it's a great problem to have that we'll be adding more people because 3 of our folks have gone on to getting jobs. So that's kind of an exciting outcome for this program, and it will grow. And you might see folks around the Central District with vests on. So we're very grateful for the sponsorship of Bottle Dropped for that program and hope to continue growing the program. We also can give a letter of recommendation when someone's looking for a job or if someone has court-ordered community service. We are absolutely able to go ahead and provide that letter. So we've even had one of our gentlemen who brings his service dog to do the cleanup around town. So we're very grateful for that collaboration and that sponsorship. Reach has volunteer opportunities. We can answer questions. If you meet someone in need, please make sure that they have our information, and we do collaborate, like I have said. I just wanted to end on 3 quick questions that are asked probably every time I speak. One is the job piece, which we touched on, about the barriers to getting jobs based on where you are in your life, the ability to shower, mental health concerns at times, whether there might be drug and alcohol support that you need before you're ready to do employment. That is a huge question that we get asked of frequently. The other one is, if we just had enough housing and apartments, wouldn't the problem be solved? And I will say that I don't think that is the complete answer. Just like all of us as a house community look at different housing models for our needs, whether it's owning or renting or living in a condominium or living in a recreational vehicle, our unhoused community members are no different. They deserve the respect of having choices and the dignity of a place to live and living that life that may not be a typical brick and mortar building. The last question I will address, well, there's 2 really. One is about, what do I do when I see people standing on the street asking for money? That is asked frequently. We as an agency always recommend that, if you want to give out socks or an item, that's absolutely your right. If you want to give out a gift card to go get a cup of coffee or a sandwich, that's wonderful. Donating to agencies who are doing the work in town is another wonderful gift. I always tell people, if you decide to give money, give it with no strings attached. And so we do talk about that. The other thing that gets asked frequently from community members is, I see a gentleman on the corner and no one's talking to him. No one has been out to see him. Please stop and remember that you may not see someone out there. We are very well connected with our unhoused community members. That doesn't mean there aren't gaps in services, but we do collaborate and meet with and talk with, and we do have systems in place so that our hope is that we will connect with everyone, and we encourage community members to always call in their concerns. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to the questions and answers later.
Hi, everyone. everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk on my favorite topic, addiction. My name is Tally Wennick. I'm the clinical supervisor for Best Care's Deschutes Outpatient. And then I've worked in the treatment field for 13 years, initially part of the drug court team, and then moving into the outpatient and residential setting. And then a few years back, we started a program at St. Charles Hospital that I got to be part of for a few years until moving into my current position. So just one other thing about me that I think is important in this setting is that I'm also an addict. I've been in recovery for the past 15 years. And, but I just wanted to, sometimes it helps to put a face with what addiction really looks like in our community. And I was definitely one of those addicts. I was addicted to meth. I was homeless. My children were taken. My entire life fell apart and my family wouldn't talk to me. And so I really fit that bill and had mental health issues. Really just the very typical addict, to be honest with you. And, I was lucky enough to be able to take advantage of some of the resources and get to where I am today. Anyway, so regarding addiction, what we've noticed is that there has been a dramatic surge in addiction in Deschutes County. We've had a rise in the number of people addicted to substances over the past couple of years. That's, a lot to do just in the last 18 months or so with the COVID pandemic. That's made a huge impact and increased the numbers. And we've become much better at identifying the people that are struggling with substance use, both in the community and in the medical setting, which, doctors are able to identify it and then, sort of refer them to where they can get the help, which is wonderful. And so, but unfortunately, the process to develop the resources to accommodate the need is much slower. We have too many clients, not enough treatment resources. We're currently experiencing lengthy wait times at the majority of the treatment providers in Deschutes County, which unfortunately then can deter some of the people who are desperately in need of help. Because once an addict or an alcoholic makes the decision they want to get clean and sober, you really want to strike while the iron's hot. And unfortunately, with the lack of resources, we don't always get the opportunity to do that. And right now, the scarcity of detox and treatment beds in Deschutes County, we have 12 detox beds. That's 2 different facilities, each one with 6 beds, and then about 20 residential treatment beds. So the need is much greater than the availability on those resources. Next slide, Adam. Sorry. And so just to give you an idea of what the current system of care looks like. And so this is, depending on the severity of their addiction, would determine where they fit on this. But one of the first stops, especially for somebody that's addicted to alcohol, would be a detox center. So that can be anywhere from 3 to 10 days of a stay. And that's really to get them through that, the most acute part of the detox, where they're given, medical oversight, so that because alcohol and benzodiazepines are the withdrawal from those can be fatal. And so we really want to emphasize that with people, so they make sure to go to a detox center. Sometimes the wait can be long for that, unfortunately, but we definitely do the best we can. We've started utilizing detox centers outside of Central Oregon across the state because our availability just isn't able to meet the needs. So then one of the others is the residential treatment. And so that's more of like a 30 or 60 day treatment program where the person lives, on site and goes to treatment all day, and, the meals, everything is cooked on site. So once they're stabilized and able to complete that, then they can move to, the outpatient setting, which can be anywhere from like day treatment where they go to treatment all day and then go home in the evening, or just the outpatient setting where they're meeting with a counselor and going to some groups and then connecting, with other people. One of the important aspects of that is the peer delivered support services. And that's where a person, like myself, a person that's in recovery is there to support them, kind of engage them in the recovery community, which could be, taking them to 12-step meetings or teaching them job skills, stuff like that. So these services are all integrated with outcomes focused on reducing their hospitalizations and emergency department utilization, all that where the impact is on the community. So better funding is always needed for outreach and engagement for people who are not ready to enter treatment. And then, of course, we have the longer term recovery support, such as sober housing, employment training, and peer services. Those are for the people after the acute treatment phase. Next slide. Adam. Sorry about that. So one of the important topics that's come up a lot lately is the Measure 110. That's the ballot measure that passed in November 2020, where the Oregon voters passed approving a shift in how our state deals with the use of illegal drugs. You know, prior it was going to be you were going to have a felony, you were going to do jail time. And Oregon is now the first state to decriminalize the personal possession of illegal drugs. The measure eliminates criminal penalties for possession of specified quantities of controlled substances involving drugs such as heroin, meth, cocaine, hallucinogens. And so by that, it means that when the person is charged, it's a misdemeanor and a fine rather than a felony and jail time. So ideally, the offenders are given the $100 ticket, and then that can be waived if they get an assessment at a local treatment provider. So in theory, the idea would be that we're sort of replacing treatment with jail time, because it's been proven historically that, you know, putting someone in jail definitely does not fix their addiction. So anticipated savings achieved from the current cost of enforcing criminal drug possession penalties will then be combined with marijuana sales revenue to fund new addiction treatment and recovery grant programs. And so those programs, it's something that we're all in the process of applying for right now, is the grants. And some of the things that they will be helping with is funding provides additional resources for peer support staff. So that would be like at the treatment centers, having more peer recovery specialists that can help. And then also there will be funding available for sober housing. Next slide. So last week in The Economist, I just thought these were some great numbers. The number of people who died from drug overdoses in America soared by 30% last year to 93,331, which is a record high. Experts blame stresses related to the pandemic, as well as the closure of addiction treatment centers due to the lockdown. We have definitely seen this across the board. The numbers are skyrocketing, and it's just definitely had a dramatic rise since COVID hit. Next slide. So many of the people who were previously not abusing alcohol or other substances became addicted due to the quarantine and isolation. So these were people, you know, just your average person that really didn't have a problem before COVID. And, you know, they occasionally might enjoy a glass of wine at dinner and then began drinking throughout the day because they were locked in at home and had access to the alcohol all day. And so the increase in boredom and lack of accountability, we started seeing a whole new breed of the alcoholic and the addict. We also began seeing high rates of relapsing among people that were already in sustained recovery, people that have been sober for years. Unfortunately, one of the keys to recovery for most people is the connection with other people. That's one of the things we lack when we're in our active addiction. But then when we get into recovery, we find that being around other people really makes a huge difference. And so when 12-step meetings, such as, you know, AA meetings and NA meetings became unavailable because of the shutdown and group gatherings were prohibited, many addicts, even those with, you know, 5-10 years of recovery, began to suffer and ended up relapsing and then really struggled to get back into recovery. Next slide. So one of the unfortunate consequences was also the decrease in available services. Our residential programs had to reduce to half capacity due to the social distancing and quarantine issues. Anybody that was suspected to have COVID, of course, wasn't able to come there. And then our outpatient clinics had to be dramatically redesigned to accommodate Zoom and telephone sessions for meeting with our clients one-on-one. And then all of our group therapy, which, by the way, is the most effective form of treatment. So the group therapy had to be switched to a Zoom format, which, you know, like I said, it was great that we were able to accommodate this. But for anybody who's ever been in any kind of therapy, you can imagine that doing that over the phone versus being face-to-face with your counselor, it's just not as effective. And unfortunately, we're still kind of struggling with that. Our groups are still on Zoom. Some of the one-on-ones can be in person now, which is nice. But it's as far as the effectiveness of treatment, the effectiveness has gone way down during COVID. Next slide. Adam, thanks. So 17% increase in overdoses during the stay-at-home orders between March and May. 42% jump in nationwide overdoses in May alone. 30% spike in overdose alerts following the stay-at-home orders. Those are some really dramatic numbers. And there's just not, I don't think that the treatment community was prepared for that much of a spike. We saw it all over at the hospital and, nationwide. So, and substance abuse, substance users, whether it's alcohol or substances, are at a much higher risk to contract COVID due to their weakened immune system related to substance use. And then, of course, they have a much more complicated medical problems because of their ongoing substance use. And we saw this a lot. And during, a lot of it with the homeless community, because they really didn't have a way to social distance. And so go ahead, next slide, sorry. So one of the biggest things was the overdose deaths. And so 2020 overdose deaths, highest number ever recorded. And then you can see, in the cartoon that it's not the so secret ingredient, and that's COVID. And that has just made, we look at all of the impact of COVID, and on addiction, it's just been astronomical. Next slide. So some of the exciting new programs that we're working on is first the MOMS program. And so that's short for the Mothers Outreach Mentoring Program. So that one is specifically structured to help pregnant mothers struggling with addiction so that they can deliver healthy and happy babies. So we definitely have a population in our community. A lot of people don't see it and don't talk about it, but it's, addicts that have become pregnant, over the course of their use. And for most people, it would make perfect sense that, oh, well, if you're pregnant, then, you should just quit. And it's not that easy for a lot of them. And so these women are identified through their OBGYN and then given a referral to the MOMS program, where we can provide support and stability and some of the, supplies that they need in the hopes that they are able to deliver a healthy drug-free baby. And then the program is able to follow them for 5 years postpartum. The other one of the other ones is the medication supported recovery program. This is specific for people struggling with opioid addiction and chronic alcohol abuse. Medications such as Suboxone, Subutex, naltrexone, and Vivitrol help address the cravings and substantially reduce the risk of relapse and death when it comes to opiates. The other program that we have is a hospital-based community engagement team. That was the program that I said that I had been working on. Provides support and engagement to people with chronic addiction who end up in the hospital or emergency department due to their alcohol and substance abuse. And so this is a program near and dear to my heart, but it's one that this is a whole population that we really hadn't even been able to address. But now that we are able to have treatment providers in the hospital, they are able to get the help that they need. Next slide. Adam, there we go. So just to touch real quick, Deschutes County Behavioral Health has a Narcan training and distribution program. This supplies free medicine distribution for high-risk individuals, family members, and agencies, and free agency consultation and administration. Sorry, so the contact over there is David Bliss, and his information is there. So if you have any questions, go ahead and give him a call. One of the other things that I think is one of the keys to addiction, sorry, go back to the sober housing. Sober housing, and so we have a variety of options. This is kind of one of the helpful things when we talk about the unhoused population, because a lot of them, they want sober housing. And because when you're homeless, it's very difficult to be able to stay clean and sober. And so this is a list of some of the options that are out there. There's Oxford House. They offer homes for men, women, and children. Don's House, which is a women's only program, Nottingham House, which is a best care women's only extended treatment housing. And then the Shepherd's House here in Bend offers both men and women. Cascade Sober Living is a men's house. Pfeiffer and Associates, which is the treatment center here, they have a variety of different housing options. And Turning Points, which is a day treatment program that offers housing for both men and women. Thank you guys so much for letting me share. Again, my name is Tally Winnick. If you have any questions, feel free to call me at that number or shoot me an email about resources that I can help connect you with. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Tally. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I apologize. My connection might be a little laggy, as you could kind of tell with Tally's presentation. I was kind of forwarding the slides, and it was taking a hot second for it to go forward. But here we go. We'll give it a shot. So, yeah, I'm here to just talk about mental health crisis in Deschutes County. The way we're going to define mental health crisis is really just a crisis occurs when someone's life stress is exceeded by their ability to cope. And that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. It can look very different to a lot of different people. It can look like anxiety, it can look like depression, it can look like grief. Sometimes people pretty naturally can go into a state of crisis, the sudden and unexpected loss of a family member or friend. It's something that kind of comes up every now and again throughout the course of our lifetime. Sometimes the states of these crises can actually become more severe. They can actually become to the point where they need professional intervention and they need professional ongoing support. So talking about anxiety, depression, panic attacks, but specifically suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts, so feeling like you might kill someone else or hurt someone else, and psychosis. So seeing things or hearing things that other people might not see or hear, or believing that there might be people who are out to get you and there's no real proof or evidence to kind of support that claim. All of those are types of mental health crises, and it's on a wide spectrum. Some of them are just very normal reactions to life stressors that are going on, and then some of them can really be quite distressing. We look at the personal impacts of mental health crises. It can really cause a lot of significant pain and really impact folks' abilities to get things done. It can impact their ability to do school. It can impact their ability to find housing or get a job. Again, not all people experience mental health in the same way. And sometimes these things can be managed with professionals, but other times it can just be managed by, support and guidance from friends or family members. Generally, these kinds of crises have a large impact on the individual, on their family, and on systems at large. We saw during COVID-19 that there's a large share of individuals in the United States that experienced a significant increase in stress, anxiety, and sadness that was difficult to cope with during the course of the pandemic. So looking at the larger systemic impacts of crisis. So moving from crises that can kind of happen throughout the course of one's life and looking at more significant or acute crises that can happen. There's really a lot of systemic impacts. One of those systemic impacts can happen on the hospital. Individuals who are in crisis can often seek out treatment and services at the hospital, namely through the emergency department. People who are having panic attacks or who are having suicidal thoughts or overwhelming anxiety, a lot of times they'll go to the emergency department because it's available. They're able to provide treatment. It's 24/7. And, they're able to kind of be there. There's some definite The hospital, they do a wonderful job. I've worked at the hospital before, and I've worked with a lot of social workers there, and they all do, excellent job there, but there's some definite limitations. Sometimes it takes a while to be seen. You have to talk with a lot of different people. You have to talk with the nurse and the triage nurse and the doctor and the social worker. And so it can be quite invasive, especially for folks who really just need to talk something out, to really get something off their chest, or to really come up with a game plan to help them stay safe. And so it's just not an ideal option for some people. It is an option, certainly, if there's any kind of safety concerns. That's certainly an option to explore. But again, it's not an ideal option. And then once you're in the hospital, if you're determined to need placement, so if it's determined that you need to actually go to a place to stay safe, like in our community, we have SAGE, or the PES unit, so Psychiatric Emergency Services. Oftentimes there's very limited beds. That's compounded by the fact that the state hospital has been, we've had a really difficult time getting folks into the state hospital. Since the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, the federal government has really cranked down on the big state hospitals, and has opted more towards a community-based model where they want to get folks into treatment facilities and to residential treatment homes and those kinds of things. And that's all well and good, but the issue kind of came with the fact that as they were winding down the state hospitals, there really wasn't any additional investment into local communities to actually support those individuals. So what ended up happening was as folks with severe mental illness, severe and persistent mental illness like schizophrenia, severe forms of bipolar disorder, they didn't really have any place to go. And so instead of deinstitutionalization, so they're trying to remove people from these institutions, is something called trans-institutionalization. So they moved from one institution to another institution. And if you look kind of on our graph on the right, you'll see the number of folks there's kind of this correlating graph of the number of clients who are in, number of individuals who are in a state hospital versus the number of mentally ill prisoners. And just to be clear, this isn't a police issue. This isn't an issue that's related to police or just arresting the mentally ill. This is a bigger societal issue that we're all facing. And so that kind of leads us to the next of the systemic impacts, is that a lot of our jails are crowded with people who have severe forms of persistent mental illness. Deschutes County jail system has 6 beds specifically designated for high medical or psychiatric need, which probably isn't anywhere near enough. One report from 2014 out of Multnomah County indicated that upwards of 43% of their inmates at the Multnomah County Detention Center had a mental illness, and they only had 10 acute psychiatric beds, which is just staggering to think about. And so again, looking at the idea that the state hospital's closed, there's a lack of access to services, and where do these people go? They can't go to they're not at the state hospitals. They don't exist anymore. A lot of times folks ended up going to the jails. They ended up becoming homeless, or, facing kind of other challenges. One of the solutions to this has been working with police through something called CIT, which is the Crisis Intervention Team. The primary goal of CIT is to improve officer competency and community safety. It's to increase connection to mental health services for people, and really to reduce the trauma for folks who are experiencing severe and persistent mental illness. Again, this is one solution to really kind of address the police aspect of it is to kind of develop these relationships with one another, but there's still this large issue that persists, that there's not enough beds, there's not enough supports. There's kind of this common theme that's kind of emerging. There's not enough resources available for the staggering need that's out there. On our CIT team, we actually have a pretty large swath of individuals who are participating. We have Ben PD, Deschutes County Sheriff's Office, the hospital. We meet monthly to try and figure out how are we going to address systemic issues that are facing folks with mental illness in our community. Here's a picture of some of our folks, not even all of our folks. We have a pretty large and active CIT program, which is pretty amazing. So one of the potential solutions that's been developed is the Deschutes County Stabilization Center. It's a collaborative effort between Deschutes County Health Services and the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office to develop a 24/7 crisis stabilization center with a 23-hour respite, and at some point in the future, a sobering station. We've had a soft opening on June 1st, 2020, which is smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, so great timing on us. And we've been in continuous operation for 24/7 since October of 2020. So what the Stabilization Center does is it really offers an increase in access to services. It reduces the number of individuals going to the emergency department for a mental health crisis by providing them with an alternative. So instead of, someone having suicidal thoughts at 2 a.m. and they can't go to sleep and they just can't shake these thoughts, they can come to us. They can come to the Stabilization Center and try to talk with one of our therapists. We, our wait times are generally quite low. It's sometimes we've had to ask individuals to wait for a little bit, but overwhelmingly we see folks within 20 minutes and you're able to see a therapist and meet with them for longer periods of time. We're able to provide wraparound crisis services where we're able to meet with the individual and to continue to follow that individual past their crisis so that we can help to get them connected with services. And that leads to kind of the second goal, which is just to help people experiencing mental health crisis stabilize in the community. So in a lot of ways, we're kind of a pressure valve for the community. If there's issues that kind of come up, we've had a lot of, there's a lot of gaps, is kind of another theme that comes into our presentation tonight. There's a lot of gaps in our system. And the way the Stabilization Center works is that we see a lot of those gaps and we're able to help folks through those. And so we're a pressure valve, we're able to help the elderly demented individual, a person who has dementia, be able to stay safe. They can't really go to the hospital. They don't really have a home. It's where do we put this person? Stabilization Center is really there to be able to help them try to navigate some of those long-term goals. Some of the other goals for the Stabilization Center are, again, to reduce the number of individuals with serious mental illness ending up in the criminal justice system. A lot of times, overwhelmingly, individuals with kind of the severe persistent mental illness, part of the reason why they end up in the criminal justice system in the first place are generally for kind of petty crimes, criminal mischief, minor trespassing, those kinds of things. And police officers in the field are put in this really precarious situation where, say for an example, someone with psychosis has this delusion that they own this building. Kate Brown said that, I own this building and I'm in charge of this building. But in reality, they don't. They don't have any evidence to support that they own this building. They've never really owned this building. But they continue to present a problem to the actual building owners. Maybe they own a restaurant or maybe they own a business. And so they keep trespassing. The officers in that situation are in this really precarious situation where they're responding to a public health crisis in using kind of public safety measures. And they look at the situation like, shoot, the guy's sick, obviously. But we can't just leave him here. He's just going to continue to trespass. He's going to continue to walk into their building, and we're going to get called 2 minutes later. We're going to have to trespass him again, and the cycle just perpetuates. A lot of times that ends up in the individual going to jail. So the stabilization center can be an alternative to that, where police officers are able to actually bring individuals to the stabilization center. We're actually located quite close to the jail, so law enforcement officers actually have to pass us to go to the jail. And so for some of these minor crimes, they can do a cite and release, where they just give them a ticket, come meet with us. We'll try and get them connected into treatment and get them connected with services, and go from there. One of the other goals of the stabilization center is to provide a place for law enforcement to quickly bring someone in a crisis so they can get back to their duties. Again, when we have, as a society, opted to have police respond to mental health crisis calls, we're using a public safety response for a public health problem. It's like having officers respond to stroke victims. They're certainly helpful, and they're absolutely better than nothing, but their resources and what they do is much better utilized elsewhere. And so at the stabilization center, we really pride ourselves on how quickly we can get an officer in and out. We average about 4.7 minutes is the amount of time an officer comes from the time they enter into the stabilization center to the time that they leave, is the average amount of time that they stay at the stabilization center. Here's a picture of it. It's very cool. By the way, we see kids all the way through adult. We will meet with anyone for any problem whatsoever: drugs, alcohol, substance abuse, anything like that, or I guess all that's kind of the same thing. But but mental health, services, any of those things, any kind of crisis that's going on, we will help with them. We've met with folks as young as 6, and I think as old as 94 is the oldest person that we've met with. Here are some photos of the stabilization center. And this is our 23-hour respite unit. So the respite unit is not a housing resource like that Colleen and Stacy kind of identified. This is specifically for individuals who are experiencing some kind of crisis, and is to help them move through their crisis so that they can get through the other side. A lot of times these kinds of crises are time limited or time sensitive. And so sometimes it's just a matter of getting their basic needs met, helping to take care of the individual during their time of greatest need, and getting them on to more services. We also have our mobile crisis team. So MCAT. So it's a mobile crisis assessment team. It's a team of therapists and social workers who will respond with police officers to the community. We're looking at hopefully sometime maybe in the winter or fall, implementing a program where we're actually responding without law enforcement, but we're actually able to meet folks really where they're at. We meet them in jails and hospitals, schools, really anywhere. We also have a co-responder program in Bend for Bend PD. Co-responder is a therapist. Our co-responder is Abby Levin. She works with Bend PD and actually rides along with law enforcement officers and responds to mental health calls. And another thing I wanted to highlight is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. It's the largest grassroots mental health organization. We have a fantastic chapter here in Central Oregon, so NAMI, Central Oregon. And they have really kind of done some really amazing work. They do a lot of education. They do a lot of support. They've been active since 1984. They were really integral to actually implementing some of the early CIT stuff that we talked about earlier, and to advocating for the stabilization center over time. Here is some of the crisis information. So the top number is the Deschutes County crisis line. if you're feeling suicidal, if you're feeling homicidal, feel free to call that number 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You will 100% get someone. The middle number is the Deschutes County Stabilization Center. It's our 24/7 business line. That number right there, and that's actually our address. We're located just south of the jail on the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office Public Safety Campus. And then that's the contact information for NAMI Central Oregon. So if you're interested in finding out more information about mental health, finding more information about resources, or if you're interested in volunteering or supporting, I would definitely reach out to NAMI or to the Stabilization Center or to any of those resources. So I think that about does it for the presentation aspect of our presentation. So now we're going to go ahead and open it up to question and answers. So Colleen answered this in the question and answer, but potentially she might be able to answer it so we have it kind of on video. So the question is, why weren't the individuals that were swept off Emerson Street relocated? And then participants, you can go ahead and if you have any questions, feel free to type in any questions into the Q&A section, and we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, just to touch on that, as you might see my answer in the Q&A, the individuals that were relocated from Emerson Street, there was not a defined location for individuals to go, because that is a gap in our system. We do not have a legal place for individuals to camp in our region. And so that is, again, why I mentioned we need to continue to advocate for needs of different resources across our continuum, including a managed camp or safe places for people to go when entities make those decisions to relocate folks.
Thank you, Colleen. So next question, we can have Colleen answered it again in chat, but I'm not sure they can see the chat on the video. So that's why we'll have, maybe we can have Stacy answer this one too. How can people in our area give aid to homeless people besides money? More homeless shelters, more free online classes to get jobs? What's your take on that?
I would say probably yes to all of the above. I think the first thing we need to do is to acknowledge and identify that we have unhoused community members, that we have gaps in services. Absolutely partnering with agencies if you have jobs that are available, so that an agency that is working with someone could help place someone in a job if that's something they're looking for. Besides money, there is also the gift of time, volunteers to help distribute items, to help mentor. And we're looking for right now someone that would be help with job interviews and help with doing mock interviews for folks.
Awesome. So we have another question for Tally. So this question is, what is the average wait time that it takes for someone to get into detox services in Deschutes County?
So I can say that varies a great deal depending on whether people show up or not. It can be up to 2 weeks to wait for a detox bed, but also there's a wait list. And so when people don't show up, then we start calling people on the wait list. And, sometimes you can get in the next day. Other times, unfortunately, it's a 2-week wait. That's why, like I had said, is that we're reaching out to other detox agencies across the state, because when when someone needs detox, it's not like something they can do in 2 weeks. It's an immediate need. And so, we definitely try to accommodate that the best we can. And hopefully in the future, we'll have more detox centers.
Thank you. So this could be for Colleen or Stacy. Can volunteers reach out to employers about homeless individuals, especially ones with children?
Stacy, feel free to jump in. But my initial thought in regards to that, I'm assuming that the question is in regards for looking for employment for individuals experiencing homelessness. And I think the important piece there is it's always, it does not hurt to reach out to agencies looking for employment opportunities. The big piece is you never want to disclose someone's personal information, especially if they're experiencing homelessness without their consent ahead of time. But it doesn't hurt to reach out to just gather more basic information in regards to their hiring process, if they'd be willing to, be flexible with hours and maybe an interview and things like that, if that's an accommodation that someone might need.
I know we recently received a call from a local motel, and what they were asking was, they said, explained a few job opportunities that are available currently, and we're asking that we might have someone or a few people that would fit the criteria for that, and that we could then refer them over. And then we don't have to release names. We could just tell somebody, and they don't need to disclose that it came from us. And I think that's really important. I think sometimes our unhoused community members, we need to remember to honor their confidentiality. That's so critical.
So the next question is for Tally. So Tally said, the question is residential treatment the best treatment for folks with substance abuse issues? And if so, why aren't there more beds available?
So that's an interesting question, because I think that the general community makes the assumption that residential is the only fix. We get that a lot at the hospital where, everybody's like, well, they just need to go to residential. Everybody just needs to go to residential because it seems like a really easy fix. And as far as its effectiveness, it's actually never really been proven to be that much more effective long-term. And so it's one of those things where if a person is really ready to quit, then they're just as likely to quit and stay quit in an outpatient setting. And that's why we always try to go to that first, trying the outpatient setting first, which a lot of people are very reluctant. They're like, no, I just need to go to residential. And like I said, it's not the fix that people think it is. It's 30 days. And unfortunately, then people get out and then they think, oh, okay, now I'm fixed. And now I'm just going to go drink a little bit or whatever. And so it's, we don't have enough beds. There's definitely, and it's a shortage all across the state. Many of the residential treatment centers got shut down, because of COVID. And again, people are becoming more and more open to the idea, though, of starting in an outpatient setting and see if maybe that will work. Thanks.
Next question, it would be for me, I think. So what do I do if someone...
Adam, are you still there? Pardon us, everyone. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties with Adam's phone.
Is having suicidal thoughts. And so, oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Adam,
Sorry.
do you mind repeating the question, please?
Yes. Okay. So, what do I do if someone I know is having suicidal thoughts? Is the question. Sorry, could y'all hear that one this time?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, my connection's kind of hit or miss. One thing that I would definitely recommend is, this is one of the biggest myths that's out there, is folks have this thought that they're afraid to ask if someone's having suicidal thoughts. They have this idea that if I ask, are you having suicidal thoughts, that somehow they're going to give them the idea, they're going to plant the seed of suicidal thoughts in there. And so a lot of times people are just really reluctant to even ask, if someone's experiencing those kinds of things. And so the first thing I would recommend is definitely asking, and asking very bluntly. And that's a hard thing to do. It's definitely, takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts, but, asking, are you thinking about killing yourself? Or are you thinking about committing suicide? I think overwhelmingly research has shown us that that helps folks to feel more connected, helps to diffuse the situation. It helps to feel less pressure, and they feel more connected and less isolated. The next thing I would do is definitely reach out for help. Call the Deschutes County Crisis Line, 541-322-7500, extension 9, or come to the Stabilization Center, or give the Stabilization Center a call. So, absolutely. So, all right. I don't think we have any other questions that are here. So I think that might be the end of our evening. Oh, hold on. Here's one more. So this is talking about, City of Bend pushing a houseless individual in a wheelchair to the edge of Emerson Street when they were clearing, and asking, so what were the service providers doing to help individuals on Emerson Street that day?
I'm happy to take that. I can address that. So just back up a little bit. For the weeks prior to Emerson closing down and the street closure, there was a lot of collaboration and communication in putting together notices for folks, posting notices, but more importantly, going actually tent to tent, person to person, to talk about what was coming up and to be very transparent about what that plan was, to discuss things like, what do you need so that once the closure occurs, you can stay in communication with your support group, that you have a tent if needed, whatever those items would need to keep you connected to services. The hardest part about that closure, and I think we would all agree, was to have to look someone in the eye and say, I don't have a place to tell you to go. And it was traumatic for everybody that was involved. I think that that is what we'll be looking at the future, so that if there's another closure at some point, that we have those systems set up. One of the safety nets was that luckily Shepherd's House had opened and was open for folks to be able to transition right over there. And then on the day of the closure, once those streets closed, I know that Colleen and Katie and myself and other community partners were over in the parking lot near Shepherd's House, so that we could be there to offer emotional support, so we could talk with people, and that we could provide resources and any needed items that people needed.
All right. So,
Well, thank y'all very much. I think that about does it, because we're about at time. Oh, sorry. I'll defer to Paige.
Thank you, Adam. We had just another comment come through saying, thank you all for what you do and for teaching us. And I would like to echo that statement. Thank you all of our panelists and our ASL interpreter, and to all of you watching tonight. We couldn't have done it without you. We hope to see you again in person at our Deschutes Public Libraries. Check out deschuteslibrary.org for all of our great free programs and so much more. Thank you. We'll see you next time.